Hello everyone, my name is Neeraj and today we are going to see how to make use of deferred feature which was recently added to jQuery. Here is the agenda. We will look at how to make use of deferred in jQuery Ajax, and then we will look at a non-Ajax usage of deferred. In that segment, we will also discuss resolve and fail method of deferred. And lastly, we will look at an example of deferred usage in the context of caching. Deferred was introduced in jQuery 1.5 and it was further enhanced in jQuery 1.6. All the code that I'm going to discuss was tested with jQuery 1.6. Links of all the jQuery code that I'm going to discuss in this screencast are mentioned at the end of the screencast. So you don't need to make a note of a link or anything like that. It will all be available for you. So let's get started. Here I am looking at jsfiddle.net page. For the people who do not know what jsfiddle.net is, it is a web-based tool which makes it really easy to quickly test your JavaScript code. For example, you can write your JavaScript code and you can test it with any of these libraries available, all the way from MooTools to jQuery, YUI, Dojo, and whatnot. And not only that, you can use a specific version of jQuery or a specific version of MooTools. So here I will stick with jQuery 1.6 and I left rest of the options as defaults. Now let's look at the code. Here I'm looking at a traditional way of making an Ajax request. We have the URL, the context, the success callback, and then error callback. So if I click on run here, then I can see Ajax success. And if I want to simulate error, then all I need to do is type error over here, hit run, and then I get Ajax error. So this code works fine. Now we are going to look at a refactored version of this code where deferred is being used. And once again, I am pushing the whole discussion about what is deferred and what it does and how it works in a later segment of a screencast. So here I have the traditional way of doing an Ajax call, that's in comments, and then the deferred way of doing Ajax request. So let's look at the code. First thing you will notice is that the return value of the Ajax request is being captured in a variable called DFD. Well, DFD in this particular case stands for something like deferred. In reality, when you make an Ajax call in 1.5 or in 1.6, in jQuery 1.5 or jQuery 1.6, then the returned value is not a deferred object, but it is a promise object. But we will discuss that later. So for this discussion, we will assume that it's a deferred object, and hence the name DFD. And on this deferred object, I'm attaching callback success, and then I'm attaching callback error. If I hit run, I get Ajax success, and if I create an error scenario, then I will get an error. So behavior-wise, it is accomplishing exactly the same task which is being accomplished by the traditional way of doing an Ajax call. So what's the big deal? Well, the first visual difference is that in the traditional way of making an Ajax call, what will be called upon success or upon error needs to be defined at the time I am making the Ajax call. Once again, in traditional way of doing Ajax call, the success and error callbacks need to be defined at the time I am making the Ajax call. In the deferred world, when you are making an Ajax call using deferred feature, then you don't have to have the list of all the callbacks to be invoked at the time of success or error. When you make an Ajax call, you get a deferred object, and to that if deferred object we can attach success or error callback. And what this does is that it allows you to build the callbacks incrementally. So let's look at the next example. In this example, what I have done is that I have added two success callback. This is the first success callback, and then there is another success callback, and the second one puts in message success 2. And here you can see that we see both success and success 2. So as I was saying, the deferred paradigm allows you to build the callbacks incrementally, and this is really powerful because this will allow us to write code which is very loosely coupled. Let me give you an example. So let's say that you are working on a big jQuery based project, and we have two different modules, finance module and HR module. Now when the Ajax request completes, then certain things in the finance module needs to be updated and certain things on the HR module needs to be updated. So upon success of this Ajax call, let's say that 5 methods on the HR module needs to be called, then those list of 5 functions will be embedded inside the finance module code. So here the finance module is becoming very strongly tied to the HR module. In the deferred paradigm, what we can do is we can pass the deferred object to the HR module, and then HR module can attach any number of callbacks to that deferred object. So in the deferred paradigm, the point of integration or the API between the finance module and the HR module is the deferred object, which is a better contract than a finance module directly calling a number of modules which are embedded inside HR module. So let's look at next example. In this example, what I have done is that I have replaced success with done and error with fail. This is more of a syntactic sugar thing, but in the deferred world, a success is referred as done and an error is referred as fail. So the jQuery team is encouraging us to use the done and fail keyword more than success and error. So the choice is yours, but if you are using the deferred way of coding, then I would suggest that you start using done and fail nomenclature. In the next code, what we have is we have added a new callback called complete. So what does complete do? Well, complete callback is fired every single time the Ajax request has been processed. It does not care whether the request ended in success or in failure. As long as the request was completed, complete will be fired. And here in the result window, we can see that first we have Ajax success with deferred, and then we have Ajax complete with deferred. So, and then we are looking at this piece of code where we have a new method called then. So then is another syntactic sugar. What it does is that it allows, it takes 2 arguments and it maps the first argument as success and the second argument as error. So if you don't want to have 2 different callbacks, done and fail, or success or error, then you can just use dfd dot then. Let's look at one more example. Here we will try to understand what exactly deferred is. So far I haven't really discussed what is deferred. Deferred is basically a proxy object to which you can attach callbacks, and those callbacks will be called when the deferred object is either resolved or rejected. So that definition does not help much. So let's look at the code. In the very first line, what I'm doing is that I'm creating a variable named DFD, which stands for deferred, using $.deferred. If you want, you can type new here, but that's not needed. That's optional. So what happens is that when I create a deferred object, that object is instantly assigned a state called unresolved. So this DFD is an unresolved state. Then I resolve it, and then I return this DFD. Okay. Here I am invoking the function so that the return DFD I get, and then I'm calling it done. Well, we previously saw that done callback will be invoked if DFD is in the resolved status. And since I specifically set it to resolved status, it will satisfy the condition and it should call this callback, and because of that we are seeing hello world. So before we move on, I want you to understand that deferred objects are initially in unresolved state, and from there they need to go to either to resolved status or they need to go to the rejected status. So here, even before I do anything with DFD, I'm resolving it. So that's not a lot of fun. So let's look at a variation. So here what I'm doing is that when I'm returning the DFD, that return DFD is still in unresolved status, and after 1 second I'm resolving it, because set timeout is like sleep, and in this case after 1 second DFD will be resolved. So not a huge change. If I hit run, after 1 second I see hello world. So that's good. Previously I mentioned that you can either resolve a deferred object or you can reject it. So in the previous two cases we saw the case where I was resolving it. Let's reject in this case. So here what I'm doing is that I have switched from using done to done, and previously I mentioned that done takes two arguments. The first argument is mapped to success and the second argument is mapped to failure. So here I'm saying that okay, just reject it, no conditions, no set timeout, and it will get rejected. And here I get the value failure. So that's good. This is not that much fun, so let's add some more variation to it. So here what I have done is that I am getting a random number between 0 and 100, and if that random number is even number, then I'm resolving, otherwise I'm rejecting. So this is getting a little bit closer to the real world scenario. In some cases I'm saying that okay, it's resolved, do whatever needs to be done once I get to resolved status, which means that fire all the callbacks which are mapped to done, and if I reject it, then fire all the callbacks which are mapped to fail. So here if I do run, then I get success. If I try one more time, I get failure. If I try one more time, I get success, and then if I try one more time, it's still success, failure now. So randomly, depending on what the value we are getting, either we are resolving the deferred object or we are rejecting it. So now you can see that that you can develop your business logic in such a way that, okay, if I'm trying to get some value from third party or some API call, and depending on whether the call got succeeded or not, I want to do one thing or the other. This is another example where what I'm doing is that I'm not doing anything. Basically, I'm neither resolving nor rejecting. So what do you think will happen? If I hit run now, nothing will happen. And that's the right behavior, because I mentioned that a deferred object is in unresolved status, and it will remain in unresolved status until it is either resolved or it is rejected, and only then all the callbacks will be fired. So here I have two callbacks to append to body, success and failure, but they will never be fired because they are not getting either resolved or rejected. So once again, the point that I'm trying to convey is that a deferred object starts in unresolved status, and then it remains in that status until either it is resolved or it is rejected. So here what I'm doing is that I have done the callback twice. So what happens is that when the first time I'm assigning the return value from $.doit to an outer deferred, and on that outer deferred I'm doing then success or failure. So once the success or failure has been resolved, then what will happen is that the deferred object is already either in resolved or in rejected status. And after that, if you attach any more callbacks, then those callbacks will be fired immediately because they are already in resolved or in rejected status. So once again, the point what I'm saying is that as long as the deferred object is in unresolved status, it will not fire. It will keep adding to its bucket the callbacks which need to be fired when it gets resolved or rejected. But once it's already in resolved or rejected status, then you can keep attaching the callbacks. It will not fail. It will not bomb out on you, but it will immediately invoke the callbacks. That's it. So let's look at one more example. In this example, what I'm demonstrating is that at the time when you're resolving or rejecting, you can pass some arguments, and those arguments will be passed on to the callbacks. So here I have extracted the code which generates the random number, and if the random number is even, then I'm calling resolve. But when I'm calling resolve, then I'm passing that random number, and when I'm calling reject, I'm passing that random number, and that random number is being taken as an argument in the callbacks, and they can be used. So for example, if I hit run here, I see 1 is the number and failure is the message from the callback. If I hit run the second time, I see 32 success, and if I hit one more time, it's 36 and success, and one last time 68 and success. So this deferred mechanism also allows you to pass parameters which in turn will get passed on to the callbacks to be executed. So far in all the examples that I showed, I was returning DFT. which is the deferred object. However, at this point of time, I will go ahead and say that instead of returning DFD, you should return DFD.promise. Now, why should I be returning promise, and what is promise? A promise is a read-only version of the deferred object. Previously, we saw that you can call dfd.reject or dfd.resolve. So if you start passing dfd itself around, it is possible for someone to muck with it, to call dfd.resolve or dfd.reject outside of this box. Well, this method, this function, is the one which controls when DFD should be resolved and when it should be rejected. So all the business logic regarding resolving and rejection, they are here. And once the deferred or promise has been created, then that promise should be passed on to the outside world to attach the callbacks. And if I start returning promise, then no one can muck with it. No one can call promise.resolve or things like that. So that's why it is advisable to start returning .promise instead of just returning the deferred object. Also, I would like to introduce a new method called when. So here we have a scenario where two Ajax requests are being made, and upon completion of both the Ajax requests, I need to do something. Well, in a natural programming language where callback is not being used, it is not an issue. But when we have a lot of callbacks, then synchronizing the success upon success of both the callbacks or multiple callbacks gets a little bit tricky. So $.when comes in handy in those scenarios. So here $.when, we have Ajax 1 and Ajax 2. And upon the success of both the Ajax request, the first function which is done will be fired. And if any of the Ajax requests does not resolve correctly, which means that if any of the promises resolve into or they result into reject, then error will be called. So in this case, if I hit run, I'm getting success upon the completion of both the Ajax request. But here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one of them return error. And now if I hit run, I'm getting error. I'm getting error because the second Ajax is not resolving, it is rejecting. So far in all my code, I showed something like this, where dfd is equal to $.dfd. And this is, it works, it's pretty good. But notice that here I have 3 lines of code: dfd, then dfd.resolve, and then return. All of that can be merged into a single line because of syntactic sugar that $.deferred provides. So here I can say simply $.deferred function dfd and dfd.resolve. Here we are looking at a caching example which we are going to build. It's not 100% done yet. What we are going to do here is that we are going to calculate a square of a number, and that calculation should be done only the very first time, and after that it should be cached. It's a pretty simple problem. It can be solved in many ways, and here we are going to make use of deferred. So let's go through the existing code. This is log function so that I can append to the body, and here we can see the message. This is a cache. I'm just declaring a cache, which is an empty object. And then we have square function. That function takes a number, and if the value is not already in the cache, then I'm printing a log that I'm calculating the square, so that we could keep a check if we are actually getting the value from the cache or if we are calculating the value. And then rest of the part is empty, which we are going to fill in. And then if we already have the value in the cache, then we are just going to log the message that returning the value from the cache, and then return cache number. The way it would be used is that it's already predetermined that this square function will return a deferred object. And at this point of time, we already know that when a deferred object is being returned, then we should call then on that function and attach our success callback. Also notice that the success callbacks, they are accepting a value. So previously I had shown that while resolving, we can pass a parameter to the callback. So here all our callbacks are expecting the answer in the callback. Okay, so right now this code will not work, and let's fill in the missing pieces. So here first I will go ahead and I'll declare a variable dfd is equal to $.deferred, and then I will just go ahead and get the answer. So the answer will be, ideally all the vars should be declared at one single place, but here I am declaring individually. So the answer is number square okay, and then what we need to do is that dfd dot resolve with answer. So we are invoking the callback with answer, but we also need to add it to cache. So we'll say cache number is equal to dfd, and just go ahead and return the dfd. So first let's see if this works, and then we will discuss a bit more. So I'm going to hit run. So this is the caching example, then calculating a square of 2, answer a square of 2 is 4. Second time again it's calculating the square of 3, the answer of 3 is 9. But see, after that it's saying that return cached value for 2, and the value is 4. So that's right, it's returning the cached value for 3 and the value is 9, returning the cached value for 2. So this caching system is working. So now the question is, why is it working? It's working because when the first time we try to get the value, the cache is empty, we resolve it with the answer, and then we store the deferred object in the cache. So that's the wonderful thing about deferred object. Whenever you're building a caching mechanism with the deferred object, you don't need to store the real answer, the final answer that the client wants. What you need to do is that you need to store the deferred object. And once you store the deferred object, and when the client calls then, and if that thing is already in the cache, it will just resolve instantly and you'll get the value from the cache. So I hope that makes sense. Well, this one turned out to be a much longer screencast than I had anticipated. I hope it was useful to you. If you have any feedback, then send it to me. Thank you.